reminded me of another one I think that is earlier, Greg, Peter Jackson film that is called Bad Taste.
Bad Taste.
If you've never witnessed that particular little gem, all I can say is a bowl full of alien green vomit is by far the most tasteful thing that happens in this movie.
Easily.
And I remember seeing that on VHS over at my friend Rob Benberry's place over in Framingham, Rashawn, over in your neck of the woods. And he had a copy of it. I don't even know it was banned. It was just like one of these things that just was, you know, it was hard to get a hold of because he was just doing independent filmmaking out of New Zealand. And if you had told me after watching that film that one day he was going to go on and make a movie that, you know, a set of trilogy of movies that I wanted to make, the fact that he was going to make the Lord of the Rings, I would have told you, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Because this thing is just so ridiculous. I mean, the movie title says it all. Bad Taste. It is just so ridiculously over the top and gross and so low budget. Like all his aliens are just like dudes walking around with really bad latex masks on, holding their hands up, kind of, you know, try to hold their fingers together to look more alien-like. So
that was the thing about that period of low budget. You could do whatever you wanted, you know, like you didn't have a studio to listen to. And that's why a lot of people really respected the freedom of that. But it's like, really, you want to be this great, you know, filmmaker, and you come up with Frankenhooker. Like, really? Like Frankenhooker. This is the movie you want to, all right, yeah, we could do that. We could also do, you know, a touching film about an old woman who's at the end of her life. It's like, nope, Frankenhooker. Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the same story. I mean, in a lot of very similar ways. It's really a story about an old woman at the end of her life. It's nuanced.
I just want to say Frankenhooker was not old.
You really
some of her parts may have been, but she was not.
You got to do a deep dive into the plot. You know, you got background research on what the writer is really trying to say. I mean, when you get there, it's worth it.
Yes. Well, I think we might have treaded on Rashawn's guilty pleasure here. I didn't know we were gonna tripwire that here.
No, actually, I had no intention of talking about Frankenhooker.
I was trying to see if I could dupe you into it.
All right.
You were standing up so eloquently for it. You were doing the pitch meeting. You're right there, you know. So picture this.
Yeah, I was talking about the nuance of Frankenhooker. So I was really getting in there.
It is always, as Amelia was saying, the F level movies, right? When you've left B somewhere far behind. And with that, then I think it's, you know, even though I tried to dupe him, even though I tried to pull him in with the old rope-a-dope and see if I could get him to say something incriminating about himself, as Greg just laid it on the line. Let me hand it off. Let me bat and clean up here tonight in a four hit lineup. We're not used to that. That is the three of clubs. So what do you got for us on your guilty pleasures here?
Like always, I'm bringing you a 22 in blackjack. The funniest thing about this whole conversation and about all of horror for me is it always, frankly, for all of us, it's super personal, right? There's certain things that throughout your life are directing you towards, you know, whatever your actions are. And for me, there's a lot of weird intersections with my youth and horror movies and how I end up getting to the point of loving certain things. Some not necessarily for the crowd, some for the crowd, but like, for example, I'm 7 years younger than my brother. So in a lot of ways, the only way I could be around him is when he was watching movies and he didn't care enough to be annoyed with his little brother. So I ended up watching a lot of horror movies because of that. Now, the funny thing is, because I'm also, like most of us, product of the 80s, selection of getting to the movies wasn't so easy as hitting up your on demand. So it was like a special trip to the video rental store. Yes, kids, we're talking videotapes. It was an actual material that you had to be responsible for. And you got judged if you brought that shit back without rewinding it. I will explain what rewinding is later. It's going to take a whole nother podcast. But the point being is there's a lot of hoops we had to go through to watch a movie. And because of that, it was a very special thing week to week, or at least in our house. So being that my brother, 7 years older, had a little bit more, I wouldn't say purchasing power. Our parents were the ones doing the rental, but a little bit more say in what we got. We normally got 3 rentals where he got to pick 2 and I got to pick 1. Well, normally I end up picking some shitty movie. I'll get to that and how I intersects with this whole thing. But my brother would get to pick 2, and almost always at that age, that kid was all about the horror movies. So I ended up watching a lot of fucked up, weird horror movies. Because I gotta tell you, kids, also because you're going to the video rental store, blockbusters weren't coming out like they were like they are today, or even when you were born, whenever the hell, like in the last 30 years you were. I mean, honestly, if you look at Redbox and you think that's ancient, like who the fuck would do that? Let me introduce you to something that happened before Blockbuster. Yes, Blockbuster is the thing that we all talk about and point to, like it's a museum. It's up in Alaska. We all go there and like, surprise, this is what we used to do. Well, the weird fucking thing is before that, we actually had video stores that was way fucking worse. And you got one release like once a year. It was fucking weird. It was the strangest thing in the world. There's like 5,000 videotapes in there, but literally they're like, hey, we got a new release. So like, seriously, it's 1984. Why is it only one new release? And they tell you what it is. Like, yo, that shit came out in 1977. How's that a new release? But so the whole point being is like, you end up going through a lot of catalog. So you get to some of my favorites that normally end up being like teen slasher camp movies, or can't be any sort of teen movie like Prom Night. Shout out to fucking Jamie Lee Curtis, because she was crushing it back in the 80s. Homegirl was getting work done. She was like, yeah, horror movie, check, get me in, I'm done, no problem. Yeah, you want to start a franchise? Hold up, let me do this quick movie Prom Night real fast and I'll get back to you. Like, shout out to all the other people too. Travolta showing up every once in a while. Like, I mean, all these weird people are showing up in these campy movies. But then, like, you also got like strange, weird, because like 80s was weird as shit. So like everyone was like, yeah, let's do a slasher movie. We don't care. So you get weird things like Maniac Cop, or fucking, you know, things like Silent Night, Deadly Night, The Intruder. I mean, before I even get to Friday the 13th, and all the series that happened throughout the 80s and all the things that came throughout that, like all the copycats that would go about it. Like literally, kids, think Voltron. There's another thing called GoBots. What I'm talking about is the knockoff of GoBots. So like that's what happened with all these movies, and they just kept producing them, and they're fucking wild, which leads to another personal event that I had that connects to movies, but more in an adult way. So also, kids, back in the day when we used to drink beer, I know it's fucking weird considering what you guys are probably drinking now. And by the way, shout out to the creativity. I am not against it. I am not hating. If anything, I applaud breaking the chains of fucking drinking beer. But if you were drinking beer, chances are you did a little something called beer pong. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics. It's super advanced. But what I will point out to you is that I've won multiple games in my early 20s by singing a song called My Beefaroni. Now, My Beefaroni is exactly the opus you're thinking of. It will expand your mind and absolutely touch into some of the topics we're talking about in pre-recording about your top 5 songs, because My Beefaroni clearly is the best song that most of my friends have ever heard when I've gone through it, because that's how I won those games. Were there body parts involved in it? Maybe, but that's not the point. The point also is that it belonged to one of the best fucking horror movies that can ever exist, because it gave 0 fucks, and not in the way you art school kids are going, you nerds are going at it. Like, I've never felt more like I'm the jock and you're the nerds than this conversation today. Like, you guys are like, yeah, what about this film? Like, that's the difference. I'm talking about movies. You guys are talking about films. It doesn't matter what the difference of the gore is. That's a complete freaking Bible Belt line that we just set up for ourselves. And oh my God, I just literally got moved back to high school where like I want to sit with my friends, but I'm a football player, so I sit at the jock table. But I'm like, no, but they have the better conversation. They're like, shut up, Rashawn, you're a jock. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. See you at art class, but don't tell nobody. But like, so anyway, I'm talking about fucking movies. So anyway, I'm talking about this song, Beefaroni. It comes from this awesome movie called Summer Camp Nightmare. Now, that's not a good movie. It's not even like a classify. I'm not even sure I can get Amelia's F on this bad boy. Like, I'm seriously, this thing is getting passed in incomplete. But it's a fucking awesome movie, and they just don't care. They're about it. They're across the fucking board. And you know what I mean? This is what I mean. They have a goddamn talent show in the middle of a fucking horror movie. A talent show. They're like literally setting up a talent show, and they go through with it, which leads to my fucking favorite song, a lifelong song, a life-changing song, My Beefaroni. Now, if we're gonna get factual, if we're gonna fact check, if we're gonna do shit like that, and care about things like that, it's actually my baloney. But whatever, like that's not the point. So the whole thing is like, because of movies like that, I end up loving so many different like cheesy horror movies. Like, because I would also watch it with my brother, because again, only time he would not be like super annoyed I was near him. So I would watch things like Class of 1999, The Reanimator. I mean, I could keep going. You literally know where I'm going. I'm literally just talking about a certain sect of movies that talk about budget. It didn't matter if they had budget, they didn't. But it didn't matter if they had the budget, because also the reason why I love them, the same reason why I love sci-fi movies. A lot of these movies, because they didn't have the constraints of big budget movies or expectations, were actually willing to take chances. They're willing to actually push storylines. Sure, they're fucking normally dumb. And yes, I'm not gonna lie, I am a red-blooded heterosexual man, so there are a lot of chasing bare-breasted women. Sorry, Amelia, but I'm just being real. It's just how it was. It's like, yeah, you end up getting the movie, mom's not gonna watch, so we'll end up probably catching a shot, and we're just gonna go with it. My dad was cool with it, my brother was cool with it, everyone was cool with it. Mom was gonna watch it because she hated horror movies, so we're in the clear. But then it got to the point where, like, my brother getting older, he had more shit to do than sit at home and watch videos. And then I got to watch it. But then I also had sort of the plans of being the second child, the one where the parents are like, yeah, maybe we can't fuck up on this one. So like they actually kind of put the brakes on some of the things I could rent. So that meant I can only watch things that are like PG-13 or under, like regular fucking kids. So anyway, that led to watching shitty movies, but ultimate classics like The Gate or Troll 2, or just like, you want to talk about gross out, they're constrained in PG-13, but they're just like, we can't go with blood, and we will kill some people, but let's just go with things like pus and snot, and having a kid stand up and be like, I don't know what to do, Grandpa. The grandpa's like, pee on it. He's like, yeah, go ahead. He's like, yeah, go ahead, pee on it. That's in a fucking movie, people. Or like you end up watching shit like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, where you're like, yeah, that guy looks like he's gonna be famous pretty soon. And someone's like, dude, you're watching Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. That's not gonna fucking happen. So then next thing you know, you're watching ER, like, what the fuck is that? So like, there's so many weird things that happen when it came to that. But then like it transferred to why I love sci-fi movies, because like then you get to like They Live, or you get to like fucking like Videodrome, or Life Force, or fucking Critter Suit, like we already talked about, The Fly, like The Intersection. How about Saturn 3? Have you ever watched Saturn 3? First of all, it's way fucking longer than it needs to be. Second of all, Harvey fucking Keitel. Third of all, Saturn fucking 3. I mean, I can keep going, people, but I'm telling you, classics that are just right in front of you, and you're just skipping over. So I love this shit. It's a guilty pleasure, but I would argue that, frankly, that's how I feel about horror movies. They're just like sci-fi movies. They put heart into it. I'd rather see a shitty puppet that they're trying their best, even if the execution doesn't come off well, than like people who could totally do better, but they just fucking phone it in because they can't. And that's why I love it.
Well, I do have to say one thing. When you mentioned the song, I had no idea what you were talking about until you tied it back to Summer Camp Nightmare, and then it all clicked, and I even could see the scene in my head.
Also, and I always forget this, Welcome Amelia, and I hope I haven't scared the shit out of you, but also I can't not forget Return of the Living Dead, because that introduced something that we started to see throughout the rest of the horror genre every once in a while, and that is people willing to actually have more humor than scares, and that kind of led to things like how we end up getting to funnier but still scarier movies. And also that, I would argue, is also to do with another movie that's been brought multiple times with the Army of Darkness, is as we've watched the series and watch it, because Evil Dead 2 was pretty campy in a lot of different ways, but they're still pushing the horror movie. And I think Army of Darkness was willing to not only introduce the comedy element to it, but be so brave with it that it became iconic.
It's funny when you mention, well, one, I just got to give out the shout out to Chuck Connor.